What's going on, everyone? Virgil in the Cut here, and I hope you're doing well. As you know, we talk a lot about sustainable productivity, and that includes taking all the little L's that we get in life and using them to build a way forward so we get a little bit of clarity, both for our present and the future. Now, before we jump in, we hit 1,000 views on this channel last week, so I just want to say thank you again for all your support, all the likes, shares, even if you can comment one of those like waving emojis down below in the comment section to let me know you're here. I appreciate all the encouragement and notes of how these videos have helped you. So it's no secret that this year just hit different for a lot of people. There's this, today I don't feel like doing anything kind of energy that feels like it's just stretched on way too long, and it feels kind of blah. And coincidentally, a lot of news and social media the past week were filled with this word highlighted by Wharton professor Adam Grant to capture this feeling. It's called languishing. The word languishing sounds way more intense than I think it needs to be, but all it means is emptiness. It's not necessarily burnout, we're not there yet, but it's not a great place to be in either. It's kind of this halfway point between feeling really good, feeling excited, and feeling like the world's gonna end. And so what it is it's blah. And so whatever you call this feeling, it definitely hit a lot of us like a wave this year. And I don't think that's surprising at all, especially after the year that must not be named. Now, one of the things that caught my attention in this piece that Adam Grant wrote was he actually talks about this concept called flow and how you can use flow to overcome, or at least help you overcome, this feeling of languishing, this feeling of blah. And it's really interesting because if you've seen my channel before, you know that I've mentioned this concept of flow a couple times. Flow is this amazing mental state where you're completely absorbed in whatever it is you're doing. Time seems to fall away and you forget where you are and everything just seems to click. If this is your first time hearing about the flow state, it might sound like it's something out of Avatar or something like that, but I promise you it's real. It's something that I've tried to continually train myself to tap into more and more in my journey to be productive sustainably. And so when I'm in flow, whether it's through dancing or choreographing, or even when I'm in the zone at work, it feels amazing. I can get a lot done in a short amount of time and I feel accomplished. All right, so to break out of this feeling of languishing, flow helps, cool. But to be honest, I'm not at the point where I can just tap into this flow state whenever I want, right? Even before the pandemic, I was finding difficulty staying focused between different tasks because I found out that my attention was literally that of a goldfish. Okay, here we go. Time to read this email. Hi. What was I gonna say? Who was I writing to? Where am I? Who am I? Actually, Adam Grant touches on this too, the attention part, not the existential crisis part. But he talks about fragmented attention and how it's become such a huge issue in preventing people from entering the flow state, getting work done, and also ultimately breaking through this feeling of languishing. You have people who are checking their email 70+ times a day, or going through this whole TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, LinkedIn, social media loop over and over and over and over again. And it got me thinking about this book that I used to teach in high school to my students. And it's this book that I have right here called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens by Sean Covey. Now, if the name of this book sounds familiar, it's actually because Sean Covey is Stephen Covey's son. And Stephen Covey wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Sean was able to take his father's book and adapt it to a younger audience. And so I used this as a high school teacher teaching 9th through 11th grades. And I found that as I was going through this book, I was actually learning a lot of the same concepts as I was teaching them to my kids. And so I highly recommend reading either of the books. I actually prefer Sean's just because it feels a little bit more relatable to a younger audience, but both books are extremely good reads. Highly recommend both of them. So in this book, Sean introduces this concept known as time quadrants, and it's a super important concept to be able to understand that helps a lot if 1, you're stuck in this feeling of languishing, or 2, you actually have a lot of trouble getting into the flow state because you have scattered focus, right? And so it's actually really interesting because my friend Sam pointed out that there's this thing called the Eisenhower matrix that has a lot of similarities, and they're pretty much based on the same principles. So this is how the time quadrants work. The quadrants focus on 2 characteristics that describe the tasks that take up our energy. The first one is urgency. Does something need to be done now or not? The second is importance. Is something important or not? We can describe each of the quadrants here with a mix of these 2 characteristics. In quadrant 1, these are urgent and important tasks. Let's say you have an assignment from work or school due today, or you're in the bathroom and you run out of toilet paper. These are tasks that you do first because you have to, but when we procrastinate, we also tend to find ourselves in this quadrant a ton. In quadrant 2, we have tasks that are not urgent, but super important, and these include planning, working out, relaxing, yes, self-care is a priority, and other tasks that act as our investments for our future. These are tasks we want to prioritize because they help us become more sustainable and help us grow in the long run. Activities in quadrant 2 can also save us a lot of extra work by working smart and just not hard, so this is ideal. Now we're going to skip 3 for a second, but in quadrant 4, we have tasks that are neither urgent nor important. This is where we spend a lot of time when we're actually burned out. When you're stuck on social media, even though you know there aren't going to be any new updates, it's different from relaxation because it doesn't feel good to be here. And this can cause a lot of anxiety out of guilt, especially if there are other tasks and responsibilities waiting in the other quadrants. Now I've left quadrant 3 for last because it's the one that I feel like a lot of us are stuck in when it comes to languishing. This quadrant is full of urgent but not important tasks. It's not the burnout phase, but it's full of tasks that we do because we feel like they're urgent, but they aren't important in the grand scheme of things. A lot of times these are other people's priorities. This also includes a lot of FOMO, thinking that you need to respond to every text or thinking that you need to answer a bunch of emails right now. Tasks in quadrant 3 tend to be a little bit sneaky because it still feels like you're doing things. If you're answering a bunch of email that's not necessarily important, but it feels like it's urgent, you see that number go down and you feel some sense of accomplishment. When you're knocking out and clearing all your social media notifications, it can feel like there's this sense of completeness. And all that while, the bigger priorities and things that really matter to us start piling up. When we spend too much time in quadrant 3, when we're doing tasks that we think are really urgent but not necessarily important, we end up developing these unhealthy habits of being reactive or running on autopilot. We're answering countless emails and text messages and we're getting all the minor stuff done, and a lot of it, but we're missing a lot of the major things that we need to be focusing on as well. And so it's kind of like if you were a firefighter and you had a bucket full of water, right? And you spend all day trying to fight this fire, filling up the bucket with water, going to the fire, putting out little parts of the fire, when in actuality, it might have made sense to devote some time to get better equipment, get some support, and actually put out the whole fire. Because at that rate, if all you've got is your bucket, there's gonna be a point where the fire will spread faster than you can contain it. In other words, your efforts start to feel a little empty, right? It feels like you're doing a lot of everything for a lot of nothing. And that can push you into feeling that feeling of languishing, right? Or a lack of motivation or sense of purpose for why you're doing what you're doing. And while languishing isn't burnout, it definitely is a path towards it. So we gotta keep it real. All of us spend time in all 4 of these quadrants at some point in time, right? And there's no way that you're gonna go from living in quadrant 3 most of the time to just 100% I only do quadrant 2 things the rest of my life. That's not gonna happen, and it's not realistic, right? But what we can do is focus on a couple steps that'll help change the balance a little bit, take away a lot of the pressure out of Q3 and even Q4 so that you can focus on tasks that are important. And even if it's just a little bit, these steps can help you become more sustainably productive and, of course, tackle that feeling of languish. So what am I doing to try to find a better balance between all of these different quadrants to help push myself away from languishing, as well as making sure that my time is spent on things that matter, whether that's school or work or otherwise, right? So I'm gonna leave 3 quick tips that I'm actually doing right now. Tip number 1 is do an inventory. Track yourself of where you fall in each of these 4 quadrants. Make one of these time quadrants yourself, and throughout the next week, anytime you catch yourself doing different tasks, start writing them in each of the different quadrants based on which one makes the most sense for you. Keep in mind that your chart might look different than someone else's based on different priorities, responsibilities, and schedules. For myself, I realized I was spending a lot of time reacting to asks from other people that weren't important in the moment, but I had pushed them to become super important and things I had to get done right away. And by doing this so much, I lacked the energy to tackle some of my own bigger responsibilities, especially later on in the week. But I still did work, it just felt blah. The second tip I have is to start small. Take a look at your schedule next week and see if you can carve out 10 to 30 minutes of time where the only thing that you're allowed to work on during that time are tasks in quadrant 2. So remember, these are not necessarily urgent things you need to get done right away. These are important tasks though. So these are things that you're investing in yourself, like planning, so you can stay sustainable for the long term. Remember, you want to work smart and not just hard. And so what I started doing actually this past week is around lunchtime, or depending if I have meetings, I might move around this half-hour block. I've started scheduling half an hour every single Monday through Friday for work, where I'm doing only quadrant 2 tasks. And that way I'm not running into the trap of going Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, not doing all of those big tasks and focusing more on minor stuff, and then being hit with this giant wall on Friday of, oh my gosh, here are all these things that I have to do that are really important that I've been pushing off till the end of the week. Especially if this last week you've been feeling kind of numb, or it feels like you've been running on autopilot, practice saying no to putting more things on your Q3 list. The next time someone asks you to do something this week, or the next time you find something on your plate, ask the question, is this something that needs to be done right now? And if the answer is no, say no. Or say, I can do this, but at a later time. Sometimes it's not just the fact that you're getting another quadrant 3 task. It could just be that there are too many tasks on all of your quadrants at once. And sometimes it's okay to say no so that you can focus on what is most important. Unless you can time travel, then I guess your problem solved, but then you wouldn't be watching this video. Speaking of which, that wraps up this week's video. Thank you so much for watching. As always, let me know in the comments below, or even on Instagram. Shoot me a message, let me know if these tips worked for you, or even if they didn't work for you. But I'm hoping that you have a great week ahead, hoping that it's not full of blah, it's not languishing, and I'll see you in the next one.